Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Thursday, April 24th. I'm your host, Tony Gerdeman. The Texas game is in 128 days. The Michigan game in 219 days. Planning your next event. Make it unforgettable with Grateful Griddle. Columbus's favorite food truck is serving up smash burgers, gourmet sandwiches, and good vibes. Book your catering today at gratefulgriddleoh.com. As you may have noticed, I'm not Tom Orr. Tom is out of town. We're going to try to hold things down for him while he's out. And today I am joined by Mark Rogers. You may know Mark from YouTube. If you don't, check him out. Go to youtube.com / Mark Rogers TV, I believe, right?
Yeah.
But Mark covers all kinds of college football. I've been on his OSU channel with him and with Bucknut Steve Helweg, and we just started our 7th year of doing a weekly show, which many of you already know about. But the reason that Mark is here today, and it's not just because I needed a guest because I'm doing this for Tom. No, Mark wrote a book it's titled Disputed National Champions, College Football's Historical 1990s Reset. And this is right in everybody's wheelhouse of just, I don't know, bickering is not the right word, discussing the college football history, Mark. So tell us what the book is about to give people an idea of why it's in our wheelhouse.
Well, of course, our beloved sport of college football is the only sport that exists in which a people's opinions have mattered more than almost anything else throughout the history of the sport. You know, it's not the Super Bowl or the World Series. Okay, we know X, Y, and Z has to happen, and there we go. We've got our champion. It's becoming a little bit more structured, of course, during the course of the playoff. But I love disputing this sort of thing in regards to whose resume stacks up versus whom's, and why did this team get ripped off, and who forgot about them, and why, and so forth and so on. So the 1990s seemed to be the perfect decade to dissect all of this, because that was the one decade in which there was the first major change in all of this. So we go back to 1936, we got the AP poll started, and since then, going into the 90s, nothing ever changed from 1936 going into the 90s. The AP writers and the coaches poll determined the national champion. And the first thing people think of when I tell them I wrote a book and it's called Disputed National Champions is, oh, well, they're going to dispute all the ones that were split national championships, which that's reasonable to think. I pretty much dispute all of them to some degree. So we go into the 1990s, Tony, and as you well know, there were different influences and factions that started to try to determine a more legitimate way to do this. And the first one was the Bowl Alliance, the Bowl Coalition. Let's get 1 and 2 together at least, because, the two of us, well, I've got a few years on you, but grew up at a time when you had to check the newspaper the next day after New Year's Day. You'd watch the rose, the sugar into the orange late at night, and it was nice. You'd watch these games and just love the football on the field. But at the end of the night, it's like midnight, and you're thinking, I think I know who the national champion is, but we're not going to know until tomorrow morning when we open the paper. So we'll wait to see what the official count is. I think number 2 beat number 6, and since number 1 lost to somebody else, I think they're going to be number 1. And so that was just kind of this mystery. And then we finally got, again, number 1 and 2 together most of the time once we got into this Bowl Coalition. But of course, the Big Ten and the Pac-10 wanted nothing to do with that. So that threw a monkey wrench into it. So I just figured, hey, I'm going to write this book, and I'm going to focus on the 1990s because we had changed during that decade. And I'm going to look at every season and basically going to go through the preseason hype. Who were the expected championship contenders? I'm going to focus on them, kind of go through the storylines, a 1993 where Bobby Bowden finally won a national championship, the storyline being kind of like, okay, this guy and his program are dominating, continuously finishing in the top 5, but they can't get over the hump. And so I kind of weave every season through the eyes of one particular team and how they entered the season. Then we just kind of give a brief synopsis of the season, the controversial plays, the big games, the big moments. and then set up the postseason to say, okay, well, these were the rankings prior to postseason. Therefore, it set up these matchups. What happened in the postseason? Was there controversy there? Here's the final rankings. Okay, do these final rankings make sense? Are they credible? Who got screwed? That's really the best part of each one of these chapters. Who got screwed? And then we look at kind of the implications of that particular season. So we go 1990 through 99.
So, and just so people, if they're not clear, Mark, you grew up an Ohio State fan. So through this, and this is basically an Ohio State podcast, how often in the 90s did Ohio State get screwed? Was because 1998, they lost to Michigan State, and it derailed them. I still think they were the best team in the nation, but these late season losses, and they weren't able to overcome them. How often did other programs overcome those, if you notice? But like in terms of Ohio State, how detrimental were the 90s in terms of, or how much were they screwed? Were they screwed?
Well, I will say this. 1998, I believed that Ohio State was the best team in the country, but I did not write this book to like splatter my opinion all over the place and say, well, they were the best team. They should be the national champion. Tennessee finished undefeated. And even though they were probably not playing the right team in the BCS championship game, I'm not going to try to take away a national championship from Tennessee. And I rarely do that in what I do just overall and kind of dissecting all these national championship seasons outside of this book. But I tend to be adding national championships to other teams. But as you well know, Ohio State was right there with one loss with 5 other teams. And it was just a ridiculous scenario to try to wedge one team into it. And so that's a situation where I don't believe Ohio State's got a legitimate shot to claim anything, even though they probably were the best team in the country. The season that gets forgotten by a lot of people is 1996, because if you look at it, Florida lost on the same weekend Ohio State lost. Florida got to avenge its loss to Florida State. Ohio State, of course, wins the Rose Bowl over number 1 Arizona State. So there were 2 or 3 people out there that voted Ohio State number 1 in both polls. I think they got like about 5 votes in one poll, and they got like a 1.5 or 2.5 votes in the AP poll. But if you look at resumes, if you look at kind of a logical breakdown, Ohio State has a claim for a national championship split with Florida in 1996. And if you really want to go beyond that and not consider the bowl games to be de facto playoff games, Florida State has an argument to say, we should have a 3rd national title sent our way because we split with Florida and we finished with the same record as the other 2.
That the 96 thing, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, if Arizona State wins that Rose Bowl, they're probably national champs, right?
Yes.
And so Ohio State beating them, well, why not Ohio State? If all of these teams have one loss, because that was the year Arizona State beat Nebraska, I believe, and just watching that back at my apartment, I think on North 4th in Columbus, and just being like, at that time, I know it's going to sound crazy to the young kids, I didn't know that Nebraska could be beaten. It was like just understood that nobody's going to beat these guys. And then Arizona State and Jake Plummer, did they shut him out? It was
19-0.
And that was just one of the most shocking things. So then to go and beat that Arizona State team and the way they were able to, Jake the Snake, Jake Plummer was one of those guys you were just kind of afraid of because he was always going to do something. So yeah, I'm not going to argue about your argument there. How did you see? What did your study and your accumulation of data tell you about '97? And as we know, Michigan was the AP and the AP champs, and Nebraska was the coaches champs. What did you find out with that? What did you come to? What conclusion did you come to with the '97 season?
Well, see, in a sense, you would think that the book would be more centered on, as I alluded to before, the split national championships. And it is certainly, it's a great debate and so forth. But because of the way I attack this, there's actually less controversy in those seasons because you've got 2 teams that both went undefeated and had really tough schedules. And the system did not afford us a game between the two. So the purpose of this book is not to say Michigan's better than Nebraska in 1990 or Nebraska's better than Michigan, and they would have been the national champion. I don't do that in any such way, although I do kind of. I do to a certain extent. Because I've determined that people do want you to interject
Mm-hmm.
opinion. But I'm not trying to take away national championships from either one. They're both earned against really good schedules. It's funny. They both have their claims. The claim on the Michigan side is that their schedule was slightly tougher. The claim on the and that Nebraska lucked into the shoe kick in the end zone against Missouri,
Mm-hmm.
and that was about as lucky as you can get, because if that ball falls to the ground, the game's over. It's not one of these where that was second down and we'll
Or
never know
fifth
what
down.
happened. The game was over. On the other side, Nebraska sure was dominant against what was probably the other best team in the country, Tennessee and Peyton Manning, and just smashed them in the I always get it mixed up, 97 and 99, Fiesta Bowl, Orange Bowl, uh, and where Michigan kind of limped home and hung on against Ryan Leaf and what was a good Washington State team, but
Hmm.
not as good as those other teams.
I think there were three split national championships in the '90s, starting with Colorado and Georgia Tech in 1990. And I don't know if people recall, like Virginia was also in the mix for a while that season. That's how long ago all of this was. Where Colorado, Georgia Tech, Virginia, like two ACC teams at that point were battling it out. And there's just so much history through all of this. And you look at the national champions over the course of that decade. I think it's interesting that where '97 is basically not controversial for you, because it's like they should have played this. That's what the conclusion is. They should have played, and they would have if we had gotten if we had the modern playoff system, or even the Final Four or whatever. When you're looking at all this, how much are you bringing in the CFP at all? Like, are you saying, like, are you looking into how many times Ohio State would have been in the playoffs, or how many times this team would have been in a playoff? Is there any mention of playoffs in this? Since
Oh,
that's
yeah.
that's kind of the overarching thing of, if this would have happened, if these teams would have been doing this year, how many of them would have actually gone through and been able to win playoff games? Because, as you said, you'd go to bed and you'd wake up like, I wonder who won the national championship. I've seen all the games, but I don't know. Whereas now it's like you can't just win one game to win a title, and it's like there were conferences that had no conference championship game. It was just like Ohio State, you go play Miami. The winner is the national champion. Whereas now it's Ohio State, you go play Miami, and then after that we got three more for you. So how much of what kind of conclusions did you draw with this project, and how the playoffs are, like, kind of just overhead?
Yeah. You're getting into the real fun of this book for me, because while I love the history's amazing. I know that for a lot of people, they would just be simply like, okay, well, that already happened. It's dead. It's gone. It's in the book. Quit trying to,
Mm-hmm.
be a rebel rouser and question what was decided 30 years ago. So I didn't want to make it just a history book. So we take all these seasons, and first of all, it's just fun, I think, to see. Well, we had no conference championship games in 1990. Then we had the SEC jump in '92, and so forth and so on. And by the end of the decade, the Big Ten still and the Pac-10 did not have conference championship games. So to simply let everyone know, based on the standings in the conference, these would have been the conference championship
Mm-hmm.
games. Are kind of fun to look at. Number one. Number two, then I also, and this takes a lot of conjecture, speculation,
Yep.
but in 2025, these would have been the conference championship games. Now, the schedules would be different and all that. So, we got to take a leap of faith there. But yeah, I run all of these seasons through the BCS. I run them all through the 14 playoff. I run them all through the 12 team. And then I run them all through the 14 team proposed playoff. So we got seasons where Southern Miss makes the playoff and East Carolina. We got some interesting candidates.
Yeah, because they would be like what the highest ranked group of 12. East
Yeah,
Carolina with the Jeff Blake, perhaps is that would that
yeah.
have been about right? That went head toe to toe with Florida State in a bowl game and beat them one year. I can't remember. I just know like it was fun watching Jeff Blake. The one time I got to see him in a bowl game, or whatever, throwing deep, and then he goes to the Bengals, and I'm like, I know that guy. Uh, so when you run these playoffs, like how are you? Like, are you just setting them up and say like draw your own conclusion, or like are you drawing some conclusions? Or are you just saying, look, this is what we could have had?
So hey, let's just grab a season
Yeah.
here. We got the 1997 season. Okay, so if we want to parlay this forward, because Ohio State's going to be included in this, um, the 14 team playoff. If we want to go, well, we might as well stick with the 12 since that's what we've got here currently. Of course, what also is funny about this is because this decade starts with so many independent teams
Oh gosh.
that
Are they all group of 12 or the group of 5? Like, is this, are they all only
well,
one team
yeah,
could come
you
from
got to
that?
go at large bids.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've got a lot of Big Ten champions with 3 losses, given higher seedings than undefeated Miami teams,
As
because
it
hey,
should be.
you're independent.
Yeah.
You got to win a conference. So in 1997, Michigan's the 1 seed out of the Big Ten. Nebraska's the 2 seed out of the Big 12. Then you got Tennessee out of the SEC as the 3 seed. Florida State, the ACC champ at 4. Washington State, the Pac-10 team, 5. And then Syracuse won the Big East, even though they were number 14 in the AP rankings. They're the 6th seed. And then we got our at-large run of UCLA 9-2, Florida 9-2, North Carolina 10-1, Ohio State the 10 seed at 10-2, Kansas State and Colorado State, number 18 in the country, is your 12 seed as the group of 5 rep.
Wow. That's a pretty low ranking for the 12 seed. So, what's in where does Ohio State? Who do they start off with then in that playoff, that
We
97
play a
at
7-10 game at UCLA.
the Rose Bowl? That's easy. No.
Can you
Now,
imagine now, Tony, that back then we're looking at 1997 and a 9-2 UCLA team was ranked 3 spots higher than a 10-2 Ohio State team?
man, times change, and that was nearly 30 years ago. And there's all kinds of stuff like you just start flipping through it. You're going to be like, you'll go back in time, and then you'll be like, this would have been so much better because I know Ohio State was going to beat these jokers. They would have ran through Tennessee in '98. They would have done. T. Martin had no shot to stop Ohio State, and they would have been all over that. There's just a lot of fun, and if you are into the college football, some of it's minutia in terms of just like the arguing about it, like all of the things that we argue about. Is that it's also just a more wide ranging discussion. So I'd encourage it. And you can find it at Amazon. Just go to Amazon.com, type in what disputed national champions right
Perfect.
there, or type in Mark Rogers, and you will find it. I promise you that it's easy to find. So check that out. Mark, want to thank you for stopping by. I honestly, you could do another show like let's just talk about 1994. Well, not 94 because Ohio State's not in it. Let's just talk about 95, or let's just talk about 97. Let's talk about even like 2002, because the Ohio State run, like, don't change anything about 2002. It's like, well, what if they had to do 3 more games? What was it? What would that have looked like? So actually, Mark, go ahead. Let's talk about 2002 while you're here. What the playoff bracket would have looked like?
Oh, off the
Oh,
top of my head,
because
that's
Ohio
not
State
in
was
the book. We got
yeah.
Georgia was really high that year. Obviously, Ohio State, Miami. I think the other 2 spots go to Georgia and '02. That was USC, right?
I
Or
believe so
maybe
because
Iowa before
USC I think
USC
was like number
clobbered them.
4 at that time because they were like one of the top teams coming in. So I apologize for diving off into 2002, but this is just the point is like once you get started with this, there are so many arguments that you can make, and it's a fun discussion. So check that out at Amazon.com. Just do a search on disputed national champions. Correct.
And even that Ohio State team in 1994 that you tried to bypass that got just
Okay,
7
tell me.
touchdown blasted by Penn State, they sneak into a 14-team playoff at number 13.
There you go. That would have been my freshman year. I would have had to go to where would Ohio State have gone in that first round that I would have been able to road trip?
Oh, shoot, I lost it. Oh, number 13. Well, who are they playing in the first round if we've got a 14-team playoff and we've got how many buys?
Don't send me
2?
to like Illinois or something. I've done that too much.
What is that? Oregon, Ohio State.
Oh, that's a long drive. I'd have to get on a train.
Again, in 1994, that Oregon team that won the Pac-10 and lost to Penn State has a much higher ranking than Ohio State with the same record.
Would that have been a Keely Smith at that point?
No, that was before his time.
Wouldn't have been
Correct.
Joey Harrington.
1994. He did not quarterback that team that played Penn State in the Rose Bowl.
But I digress. It's just all kinds of, it just takes you back. So check it out there. Mark, thank you so much for stopping by. Do appreciate it. And of course, you can always find Mark at youtube.com/MarkRogersTV, where he's talking all kinds of college football and also your Buckeyes. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys tomorrow.